Thank you very much to Be So Rich for playing us in, and to Harry Droz, who is the station manager behind the controls, making everything run. This is Arts Respond on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. I'm your host, Lucy Gellman, and today I'm very excited to be here with Faisal Saleh, who is the executive director, founder, part-time curator at the Palestine Museum US, which is in Woodbridge. You haven't visited this museum yet, I cannot recommend it highly enough, and we will talk about some of the exhibitions that have cycled through and are in the space right now. But first of all, Faisal, welcome to Arts Respond. Thank you very much for joining me on this Friday. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Lucy. It's my great pleasure to be with you today.
So as we begin, I would like folks who maybe are not familiar with you or with the Palestine Museum US to know a little bit about what this space is. So you opened, I think 3 years ago? I don't know what time is anymore because we've had this pandemic. And
it's 5.5 years ago.
Oh my gosh, 5.5 years ago. Yeah. So I have no sense of time. But I would love for our listenership, which is very broad and includes artists, but also folks who are not in the art specifically, to know a little bit more about you and what compelled you to open the Palestine Museum US.
Great. Let me start from the beginning. I am a Palestinian. My family comes from a village near Jaffa called Selma. It's about 5 kilometers east of Jaffa. In 1948, my family became refugees. They lost all their belongings and their property and everything, and ended up in the West Bank town of El Bira, which is a twin city to Ramallah. I was born 3 years after that, and I was at that point the 11th child to my parents. Don't know why they decided they needed one more, and they have 10, and they couldn't feed any of them. I grew up in the West Bank, attended public schools there, and I lived 2 years under the Israeli occupation. Israel began occupying the West Bank in 1967. So in the summer of 1969, I came to the U.S. to finish my last year of high school, and I had a scholarship from a Quaker school in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia, called George School. And after finishing that, I went to Oberlin College, again with financial aid from the college, for 4 years, and graduated with a BA degree and began working. My first job was at the Travelers Insurance Company in Hartford. I had a few jobs. And then after that, I really didn't like working for big companies and decided to strike on my own after 5 years of corporate work. And did some entrepreneurial work initially that did not really go well, but with perseverance, I progressed into other things, and eventually had a very thriving business that I ran for 25 years. And I sold that business in 2010. And following that, I bought into a small consulting firm just to stay in the profession. And 10 years after that, that firm was sold, and I worked there for a year with the new company. And a few months ago, I retired from that business altogether. Now, while I was looking for things to do after selling the company, I came across the idea of starting a museum for Palestine. I had been looking for things to do because for like 40 years, I just was busy working, kept my nose to the grindstone. And I wanted to do something for Palestine, but I didn't come across anything compelling enough to do it. So initially, I thought of starting a tennis academy in Palestine and train like 100 or 200 young men and women to represent Palestine in international tournaments. But the idea, I'm very interested in tennis, and I play tennis whenever I can. And the idea ran into some issues locally because the authorities, the Palestine Authority there, is really not very progressive, and they're somewhat corrupt. And for me to try to set up a business there, it was going to be very difficult at best. So I canned that idea, and then the idea of the museum came along. At the time, there weren't any Palestinian museums in all of the Americas and possibly all of the Western Hemisphere. So we were looking at a big vacuum when it comes to art and museums for Palestine. At the same time, there were at least 70 museums that kind of supported the Israeli narrative and disseminated it. So there was quite a big imbalance, and there was a big opportunity to create a voice for Palestine in the art world, and hence the idea of starting the museum, which I worked on it for close to a year, and then on April 22nd of 2018, we opened the museum. And when the museum opened, it was totally full with artwork. We had over 200 works of art, a couple hundred photographs, and we had a tremendous opening ceremony with music and Palestinian cuisine, and about 130 attendees.
Which
So
has
that's
been amazing. And I also have found often actually in talking to artists, but also folks who are sometimes people feel a certain way about a political or a global debate or issue. And I have often found that artwork is a way in, a very beautiful way in. And I want to say multimedia artwork, not just visual art. Sometimes it's music, sometimes it's film, which I know you are a great lover of as well. And so for you, has visual art always been something that sort of stirs your soul? Or I guess I'm interested in how you came to specifically filling this space, which I should say is in like an office business park that Eric Epstein has done a really beautiful job turning into a museological or museum space. Filling this with visual art. And I will say there's painting, there's photography, there's sculpture and installation.
So just to be honest with you, I didn't really have much experience in the art world, and I was not into the visual arts. The only art I was really passionate about was photography, because when I was 10 years old, one of my brothers who worked in Kuwait, they used to come in the summer each year to spend a few months there, and he brought me a $10 camera with him. It was made in Hong Kong, I think, or somewhere out there. And it was a nondescript little camera. And I figured out how to use it and started taking photos with it. And I have been taking photographs ever since. So that we're looking at maybe, 60 years worth of photography that I've been doing. And of course, I saw the technology change, and my ability to afford equipment had improved significantly, I should say. And now I have the latest in photo technology that money can buy. But that's really the only art that I was familiar with, and everything else I had to really learn and fully understand what's it all about. And I had to learn what the art community looks like, not just in the U.S. here, but also in Palestine, the Middle East, and in Europe, and kind of figured it out. And my business experience over the years proved very valuable, in the sense that I'm skilled at starting organizations and being able to launch ventures and launch organizations and organize and manage and plan and things like that. So that was very helpful in terms of bringing the museum up to speed in a very short period of time. Now, I did contact a lot of artists in Palestine and Palestinian artists in the diaspora, and managed to talk to a large number of them, and kind of pitched the idea of the museum for them. Initially, it wasn't easy, because the artists were kind of not sure whether they want to work with somebody they've never heard of. But then I was able to convince one of the artists in New York, who was very well known Palestinian artist and highly regarded. Her name is Samia Halabi. She's one of the top Palestinian artists, and she's an abstract artist. And she liked the idea. She came to the building where I was planning the museum. She checked things out, and she agreed to lend me two or three impressive pieces of her artwork. And that kind of opened the door for a lot of other people to do the same. And from there on, it became a much easier task to talk to artists and get their artwork. And the way we work with the artists is we borrow their artwork, because the museum, we don't have a lot of money, so we can't really buy the artwork. And buying artwork, as you know, is very expensive. So most of the artwork at the museum is on loan from artists. Some of the artwork we've had since we opened, like for over 5 years, and some of it we've just had for a few months, and a lot of things in between. So we were able to put together a great collection from the different artists around Palestine and from Europe and the U.S. and other places. So we're fortunate that there are a lot of Palestinian artists everywhere, and a lot of them really were looking forward to having their work exhibited in the United States. And so we were able to create an outlet for these artists to share their artwork with people here.
Yes, and I should say it has also become, if it wasn't initially, I think an educational space as well, which is one thing that I know is really dear to you, and part of that has also been bringing attention to some of the violence that is happening and has been happening in Palestine. I want to highlight, of course, that over your, I'm trying to think, right shoulder is a portrait of Shireen Abu Akleh, who was killed last year in May while she was reporting. So a member of the Palestinian press. And I know that there was, I believe there was a memorial service at the museum in which this portrait was also discussed and unveiled. And so I'm wondering, Faisal, if we can also talk about some of the programming that is and has been happening at the museum, especially the ongoing film series, which I know folks tune in. One of the things I find amazing is folks tune in from around the world. If people have not heard of this series, I want to shout out Alan Appel, who's a reporter at the New Haven Independent, who wrote about last Saturday's film,
Yes.
correct? Which 130 people attended online, which I thought was really cool. That even in this sort of age of Zoom fatigue, people want a gathering space where they can talk about a work of art, a specific work of art. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the programming at the museum and your educational hope and mission.
Yeah, well, let's start with the film series. This thing started when the pandemic happened. Like a week before the pandemic was officially announced in Connecticut and things were closed down, we had just had an opening for an art exhibit, and we had 130 people here who attended the opening. And then a week later, Connecticut was shut down. So we started thinking, well, what are we going to do now? We can't just shut down the museum like that. So we came up with the idea of doing things remotely on Zoom. And I really didn't have much experience with Zoom at the time, but I had to kind of learn it very quickly. So we started by offering like one event every other week, and we thought people liked it. So we started offering it every week, and eventually we have 2 events now every week. So and the film series has really a very engaged audience, and they're very regular. Like if for some reason I don't announce a film on for the weekend, I would get a ton of email from people wondering, did they really miss the mailing or something? So we have to really work hard and to come up with a film every week. And sometimes we repeat the films, a film that we showed like 6 months ago, we may show it again, or because when we show the film for the second time, believe it or not, we get more people than the first time, because then the people who saw it want to see it again, but they also want to invite their friends and they want other people to see it, so they share it with other people and so forth. And a lot of people miss the film and they email us, well, can we see it again? And we say, well, you have to wait till we do it again in a few months. Um, so the film series has been a great success. And of course, we decided we're going to continue with doing this remote programming because it really gives us a global reach. And I'm surprised we didn't think of it earlier. In hindsight, we should have had it before the pandemic even, because that's really the best way to leverage the resources that we have and to get a great audience. Now, when people log into Zoom, they log in like 15 minutes before the show. And in the meantime, myself and I have a co-host also from who tunes in from Madison, Wisconsin. The two of us greet the people as they log in the chat and greet them individually, and they all talk back. And after a while, you get to know all these people. So like at least 60, 70 people that come all the time. And it's so interesting that it's become like some sort of a closely knit community, and they all know each other because they make comments after the film, during the discussions in the chat, and it really has been a gratifying experience. Now, we most of the time we bring the director of the film on the Zoom session for post-screening discussions, and sometimes the film directors are so amazed by the level of engagement our audience is. So we may have like 200 people watch the film, and 175 would stay on for the discussion. He said he'd never seen anything like that. And the kind of questions and the kind of people expressing ideas and opinions and things, it's quite interesting. So without spending a lot of time, the other kind of programming we do online is we have basically like a talk show. And with the talk show, we host different personalities sometimes, and sometimes we show like short films, or there may be we've seen some good interview on YouTube for a particular person. We share part of that with the audience, and then we invite people to come on the panel, and people raise their hands, and we'll bring them to the panel, and they become a panelist and participate in the conversation. And now, besides the online programming, we've done art openings, of course, when we have exhibits, and we've done two of those during the last 4 months. And we've had a cooking event one time. We've had plays, including like a one-person play recently. And we've had musical concerts. We've had an opera singer here, and we've had a variety of other types of music concerts right here. So we're just waiting for people to get used to coming back to in-person events before we start offering concerts again, even though now it's safe, but there's still a bit of hesitancy on the part of some people. So the good thing about the museum here is that our event space allows us to have 125, 130 people on site, and it gives us the ability to serve food also, because we have a lot of room in the building. So it's an ideal space. And we offer the space for free to members of the community, to nonprofit organizations who want to participate here. And we've had a number of them that have taken us up on it. And in fact, we've had some memorial services that took place here for somebody who passes away, who was a Palestinian or passionate about Palestine, and the family decides that they would like to have a memorial held, a celebration of life at the museum in honor of the person who passed. So we've had a variety of events here, including one of the local groups holds their Jewish services at the museum, like the Rosh Hashanah service and the Yom Kippur service that have been held here. So we're very excited about the programming that we do at the museum, and I want to emphasize that we're open to the community for using the space. Anybody that wants to have an event here, we provide the space at no charge, and while the people are here, can also visit the museum at no charge.
Which is pretty amazing. And I will say right now there is an exhibition called The Art of the Palestinian Thobe. It's up through the end of December, correct?
Yes.
And showcases really gorgeous embroidery and traditional Palestinian dress. If you like embroidery, if you don't know anything about embroidery, if you've never thought long about embroidery, it's a really beautiful show. And it also, and this feels like maybe a segue, um, but one thing that I was so moved by when I saw the exhibition in person was that at a time of sort of a horror that is happening in many places in the globe, including in Gaza, it forces you to slow down and to really look at detail and beauty and the hand, like literally the loving handiwork that has gone into a garment, which I found very moving. I was very, very moved by. So for folks who are, oh, did I cut you off?
No.
Okay. For folks who are just joining us, this is Arts Respond on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. If you've been with us for the past 20 minutes or so, thank you for staying with us. If you're just jumping in, my guest today is Faisal Saleh, and we are talking about the Palestine Museum US, which is in Woodbridge, and specifically Palestinian art, artists, and the museum's educational mission. I'm going to switch now to a topic that I think for both of us is difficult, which is talking about Palestinian art and artists, and also folks living in and across the diaspora right now at a time of horrific global violence that has come to Gaza. So as of this morning, the Associated Press has, has reported that over 9,000 Palestinians have been killed and that over 1/3 of those are small children. So I just want to acknowledge for folks who are listening that this is a difficult topic, might be a triggering topic. But Faisal, I'm wondering if you can talk specifically about some of the artists that you've been in touch with, and also about some of the folks that we know that we've lost.
Yeah. Well, I have a number of artists who we exhibit their work here, and I check up on them periodically by sending short text messages on like Facebook Messenger, because the bandwidth there is that the internet now is very, very tiny. And just to make sure they're still alive, and I send a message in the morning, and then I'm relieved when I get an answer back, even though if it's just a few words. We did lose 4 artists so far. Now, none of those artists have works here, but I was familiar with some of them, and the artists that I know are very good friends with them. And in most cases, they was not they weren't the only one killed, but it was their entire family. All their children and spouses and parents, and because in Gaza, a lot of people live together in extended family settings, because it's very crowded. And for most people that don't know what the size of Gaza is, it's like when you run the marathon, you run from the beginning to end of Gaza almost. And the width of it is 5 miles. It's like a morning walk. You go from one end of the area to the other, and inside that there are 2.5 million people. So that's really the size. And one of the people who passed away was the filmmaker of the film that we showed last Saturday, and the film was called Bank of Targets, which is a military term that for like when airplanes go bombing, they receive a list of targets in priority order, and they call that the Bank of Targets. And it was filmed and released in 2021, about 2 years ago. But watching the film, you couldn't tell if it wasn't the news. I mean, it's like watching the news and watching the film, you can tell them apart. It was exactly what you see on the news now. which shows that this thing in Gaza has been going on for a long time. The only difference is the scale of what's going on now. We have not seen this scale before, not just in Gaza, but anywhere in the world. There has not been any bombing of this density, of this intensity, anywhere in the world to date. It's just unbelievable. But so we are, of course, hoping that the rest of the artists will make it, but it's so doubtful. I mean, everybody's sitting at the edge of their seats, not knowing when the next thing is going to happen.
Well, that is, I mean, I also want to ask, how can folks advocate not just for artists, but if folks are, I think, finding themselves at like a moral and ethical crossroads, and I think many people are. How can folks raise their voices? How can they advocate? And also, how can they bring attention to, um, what is happening? I think yesterday you and I were able to see each other in person at the museum. And one of the things we talked about is that several, and I will say it's something that's scary to me as someone who is a member of the press and loves my work and believes in the work of amplifying art and artists in New Haven, but also across the globe. That we have seen several instances of members of the press, including within the art world. So I'm thinking of Art Forum last week, also certain writers for outlets like Hyperallergic, who have sort of been silenced or even fired from their positions for expressing solidarity.
Yes. I think the important thing for people to know is that in the United States currently, and in much of Western Europe, with the exception of Ireland, the governments and the press are on the same page, no pun intended, in supporting Israel blindly, without any questioning. Now, we are dismayed that the mainstream press has kind of abandoned its responsibilities towards being objective and telling the truth and seeking the truth. There was a time where journalists would question the government officials when they made statements, particularly when they're supporting such carnage that's taken place. People like Dan Rather, Walter Cronkite, Eric Sevareid, Peter Jennings are rolling in their grave now as they watch CNN, because networks like CNN and the other major networks have really become nothing more than cheerleaders. Where is the questioning? Where are the difficult questions being posed to Mr. Biden and to the locally to the members of Congress? When one of them stands up, and I don't want to mention any name, and says, "Well, we were in Israel, but we didn't see a point in asking for them to slow down or pause or stop what they're doing." And what they were doing were bombing the hell out of everybody and killing thousands of people every day. So where is the press? What happened to it? And the other thing that really we need to point out is there's some sort of a curtain that has fallen in the U.S. and in Western Europe over any attempt to advocate for Palestine or mention the word Palestine, and or even try just to be objective in a way. So we're seeing the return of the age of McCarthyism. I mean, a lot of you may not be old enough to know what that is, but it is a bad phase of U.S. history where the freedom of people went under attack. Uh, the First Amendment is being trashed by a lot of people in the government and in Congress, all for the purpose of protecting Israel and what Israel is doing. And what Israel is doing now is really conducting a genocide. And the politicians and the people who represent us in Congress need to be aware that they are personally liable and could be sued in U.S. courts and at the International Criminal Court also for supporting a genocide. But without getting into that, uh, people who say something, they're getting fired from their jobs for the least benign thing they say. Their job offers are being rescinded. Students are terrified to say anything because they're afraid, that they will be blacklisted. There is a site that blacklists Palestinians and Palestinian supporters called the Canary Mission. Nobody knows who funds it, but some people have some theory about who funds it. But it's obviously supporters of Israel are creating that blacklist, and they put Palestinian activists and Palestinian intellectuals and students and teachers and professors for the purpose of asking employers not to hire them and discriminate against them because they speak about Palestine. I know somebody yesterday who was a breast cancer surgeon, a very well-known breast cancer surgeon, was fired from her job at a major hospital because she posted one photograph on social media. All this stuff is protected by the Constitution and by the First Amendment. But what the heck is going on with that? When the President of the United States takes office, and when Congress people take office, they take an oath to protect the Constitution of the United States. So why aren't they protecting the Constitution? Our First Amendment rights are under attack. Our freedoms are under attack. We're going back to the 50s when everybody was using communism as a way to stifle opposition to government. And now anti-Semitism is being used in the same fashion as communism was used then to stifle any attempt at speaking up for Palestine. Sorry about the political discourse here.
That's all right. That's all right. I want to ask you a question that I have struggled with in conversations with folks this week, last week, probably the week before, especially with folks with whom I don't specifically agree on this, and I will say other issues. And for anyone listening who maybe does not agree, even with this interview being on the air, I welcome conflict. My door is open. I can give out my email address at the end of the show, and you're welcome to contact me. But one thing, Faisal, that I have struggled with is how do you talk to people about recognizing folks' basic humanity? And I am being specific here in talking about recognizing Palestinians' basic humanity, because I will say that I have had some very difficult discussions this week where I just feel like they have been absent of the notion that all lives are sacred. And I am someone who believes, like, as someone who reports in school and then hears schools in New Haven and then hears about the death of children. And I will say for myself, that means Israeli children. That also means Palestinian children. That, like, it breaks my heart in two. And so how do we get to a point where we are recognizing each other's humanity?
Well, I think we need to take a deep breath and think that we need to be equal. We all need to be equal. There's nobody better than another person. We're all human beings, and we all need to be treated accordingly. Right now, the Palestinians are being dehumanized and demonized by the media. And the media immediately uh, condemned the Palestinians for being terrorists, being everything, all that, and without any investigation, without any looking into this and that. It is not an automatic, it's a summary judgment and execution on the spot, basically. Uh, I mean, I don't necessarily want to get into the political discussion of it, but I think the media needs to start thinking about becoming more even-handed, and they have a tremendous responsibility that right now they are not really carrying out. The responsibility of the media. The media is supposed to be the fourth estate. Is supposed to be what balances the three powers of the government, the executive, the judiciary, um, and the legislative. And the the media, the press, is supposed to be the watchdog that makes sure that all these powers don't overtake and hijack the society. So I think we all need to agree that Palestinian lives matter, Israeli lives matters, Black lives matters, every life matters. So we need to stop putting any descriptives next to the lives and just say all lives matter, and let's respect life for it, whatever it is, and let's not demonize anybody. The people that are losing their lives are very innocent, and they have nothing to do with a lot of the stuff that was going on, or I mean, the scenes that you see on social media breaks your heart. I can't. Some people can't even see them anymore. You see like a 6-year old explaining to somebody that her mother died, and they ask her, "Well, how are you doing?" And she said, "My mother died." Just casually saying it. How could a child like that? What's their life going to be like? Uh, there's so many children without parents because when the buildings collapse, the children are small, and they can be in crevices and in areas that is not totally destroyed. So their chance of survival is much higher than the parents. And as a result, there's an abundance of children that don't have parents right now. Whereas, there are some parents that don't have children. They lost all their children, but the number of children is by far a lot larger, the ones who lost their parents. And it's going to be a huge problem in Gaza.
I also want to ask, I know that this weekend you, with thousands of people, are headed to Washington, D.C. And I I would like to know from you, you keep saying, I'm sorry if I'm getting too political, but I think when we talk about the basic humanity of people, it should not be a political issue, but in this country, sometimes it is. And in
Mm.
this world, sometimes it is. And so, I would like to know from you how folks can support, um, obviously, yes, Palestinian artists in the art community, but also like calls for recognizing the basic humanity of Palestinians this weekend, but of course also far beyond this weekend.
I think people who would like to help need to call their congressmen, congresswomen, or senators, and or send them emails or whatever method they want, and to urge them to support the ceasefire. A ceasefire is going to save lives. Just think of all the thousands of people who are going to be killed during the next few days. Think if that can be stopped. The American people are very passionate. They're compassionate. Sorry, uh, and once they know the facts and know what's going on, I have a lot of confidence that they will act and they will move to protect life. Um, some of the scenes I've seen. I mean, I don't want to keep going to that, but I can't help it. They stay in your mind. Is the woman that died and they got the fetus out alive, and that baby is going to live. And just think what kind of a life they're going to have. We need to protect that. We need to have a ceasefire, stop the fighting, stop the bombing, stop the killing of people. And people need to talk to their representatives and tell them that.
Well, this is also the time of the show when I ask artists and arts leaders how they're taking care of themselves. And I don't know if there's an answer for you to that question, but you're holding so much, and I know that you've been holding so much for so long, even before this. I just want to name, for folks who are listening, that this conflict did not begin in October, in the month of October. Um, and I'm wondering how you practice anything that is even close to self-care right now, because I have talked to folks for whom there is like compassion and empathy and advocacy burnout. And I think that that is also a very real thing that we are living through.
I mean, I do have responsibility to work on getting our story out. After all, the mission of the museum is to tell the Palestinian story through the arts. So we're working hard all the time trying to talk to the media. And we obviously very much appreciate an opportunity like this. And we wish that some of the other media um, can do the same. I was interviewed today by somebody from the Boston Globe, but at the end he was saying, well, if we go with this story, then we do this, is that. I told him, you have to go with this story. He says, well, I'm not really sure. So when we talk to journalists, the first thing we find out that the journalists are afraid to publish the story because they don't want to be fired. And so we need people to speak up. All I could say, wake up, America. America needs to wake up. America is not aware of what is going on. We need people to wake up. So if you can put a wake-up call for 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Or right now, or both. Yeah. I also want folks to know before we jump off how they can find you and how they can find the Palestine Museum, because I will say it's this unassuming office park in Woodbridge, and it's a portal, and you walk through. And I'm someone who has loved art for for a long time, like since I was out the womb. But I think that the way art allows us to understand other people, other people's culture, and other people's like basic human dignity is very important now, but also at all times. And so I highly recommend, even if you are for any reason skeptical of this space, I highly recommend visiting. The art is beautiful, and I would say extremely moving. So how can folks find the Palestine Museum?
Okay, well, physically, we're located at 1764 Litchfield Turnpike in Woodbridge, but visits to the museum are by appointment, and people can just email info@palestinemuseum.us. That was, I don't know if you have a way of writing it somewhere.
We do. Harry Droz can definitely drop that.
And once we get an email, we respond right away and try to schedule an appointment. The reason we're doing it by appointment is because we don't have the resources to be open 7 days a week. And we can also be more accommodating with appointment because we can set up an appointment for each person based on their time needs. So if we had rigid office hours, visiting hours, they may not fit everybody. This way we can make sure that everybody's able to visit. And we're pretty flexible with our scheduling. So we also, have our website is palestinemuseum.us. So we're also with the same name on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and X, which used to be Twitter.
Thank you so much. If folks are just joining us, you've missed an interview that I encourage you to go back and to listen to. My guest today on Arts Respond on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven has been Faisal Saleh. And Faisal, safe travels. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today on WNHH. I know that you have a very busy life, especially right now. I also want to just mention very quickly that on Sunday, November 5th, which is this Sunday, if you're listening live, there is a film, Farha, and I believe that the director is joining for a Q&A after the film. Is that correct?
That's correct. Remotely, the director will be joining on Zoom.
So, and for folks who are interested, there's a link if you want to attend, to register for viewing the film. Is that link also on your social media if folks are maybe not on the listserv?
It's on the website, the link.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
When you go to the website, Palestine Museum US, you click on events, and there's a page for each event there.
Yeah. So so if you are a lover of film, and many people are, I recommend this series. I recommend it to people. You can join from the comfort of your couch if that's sort of where you're at and how you're feeling. So,
Or you can come in person
or
also.
you can come in person.
The films are always free.
Faisal, thank you so much. And have, if you can, and I hope you can, a nice afternoon. And yeah, I hope that folks listen to this and that they explore the museum if they don't already know the space.
Yeah, well,
Thank you so much for joining us.
thank you on behalf of myself and also on behalf of all Palestinians, particularly those in Gaza, who really appreciate the world hearing about them and hearing their story. And you certainly are giving a voice to the voiceless here. And for that, we're really grateful.
Thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon. And for folks who are listening out there, have a beautiful weekend. Be safe. Blessings to all.